I've previously mentioned my soft spot for Kurt Wagner, fuzzy X-Man and a Catholic like yours truly. While many's the time his religiousness came in the form of sharing scripture with friends to help counsel and console, he was eventually written in X-Men number 100 to take things to the next level, training to become a full-fledged priest. And around that time, early 2000s, there was a mini-series that looked at him in the middle of this devotion, with some outside events calling him to superhero action. Hello, I'm the Angry Spork, and I'm taking issue with Marvel Icon's Nightcrawler, a story more focused on the mutant's faith and his struggles to seek a higher calling while sinful people remind him just what they're capable of. Let's start with issue number 1 and see if these comics make us want to sing to the heavens or seek the nearest confessional. Issue number 1's cover is perhaps a tad ominous. Our main character perched on a rooftop at night, wearing the movie-inspired X uniform of the era, but with a priest's collar, a gigantic moon behind him — we can assume God did that for a dramatic effect — as he looks down, reminding himself that if he gives in to the urge to spit on people for fun, it's 7 rosaries ahead. Written by Chris Kapiniak, with art by Matthew Smith, Mark Morales, and hi-fi design, we begin on a night in Brooklyn, as a young woman slips and drops some groceries, her boss pausing a phone call in English about an upcoming dinner party, but speaking in Thai to tell her to pick the stuff up. After a moment, the girl, Kim, makes a break for it. There's your 2-week notice! We go to our star, leaping through the air from one rooftop to another, falling and then teleporting to safety in sheer defiance of gravitational pull.
That's not fair! He's ignoring the laws of gravity!
Having been indoors and away from the X-Men too long, it's in this display that Kurt finds his freedom, his happiness, both gifts and proof of God's presence. And while he could have gone longer, he's got a dinner meeting to get to. Continuing the 2-page spread that really could have been 2 separate pages, no offense, just saying, he ports to an alley and activates his image inducer to hide his appearance, so as not to cause a stir. He snarks to himself that one day he'll use the device once too often and be stuck with the holographic look. This doesn't come up later, just him joking in his inner monologue. Entering a restaurant, he sits with his friend and teacher for his seminarian training, Father Whitney, who remarks that he ought to have taken a cab instead of teleporting so as to not smell like brimstone. Kurt jokes about being in exorcism class, seeming to brush off criticisms that he's using his powers too recklessly.
Kurt, I'm serious.
Which isn't always the best way to be, Father.
You said the same thing when you introduced Cardinal Stevens to your raspberry pie in the face alternative to communion.
Kim barges into the eatery, asking for help in Thai, while her boss tries to wrangle her back. She's rebuffed while Kurt approaches calmly, telling her it's all right, and joins her as she crouches to the ground, and the pursuing woman quietly leaves. We go to San Francisco, where several trafficked people are unloaded from a boat. The captain complains this is a bad time to do this, and worries he'll lose his ship. The lead trafficker, a Russian man named Oleg, assures him they aren't being watched, and that it was the cap's own fault his ship got impounded over bad paperwork relating to legitimate cargo. He should have paid attention to every detail on his vessel.
A good captain is good businessman.
Look at Captain Crunch. Sails high seas for a navy, invents crunch berries, becomes beloved cereal magnate. Has good head under that large hat. Likening people to milk, that both spoil quickly, Oleg decides he can't afford the problems this captain has caused, and is shutting him down, killing him with a chop to the neck. I assume killing because he tells a lackey to make sure the body isn't found, implying he's already dead. He instructs that the human cargo be cleaned for a buyer the next day, and those not purchased will be sent to a factory. Except one Oleg feels is suited for other things, as they hurry with night soon approaching. Kurt, meanwhile, has skipped his train back to Salem Center to help Kim, now a guest of the Church of St. Michael the Archangel. Neither he nor Whitney speak her language, but she did speak enough English to make it clear she didn't want police involvement, which is probably why Kurt jumps to the conclusion that she's a slave, and the woman she ran from was her owner. Either that, or the elf peeked ahead in the script. Slavery in this country, in this time, sadly isn't shocking to the Padre, since he is chatting it up with a fuzzy blue dude with a tail and pointy ears, as Whitney sips from his flask. In fact, he's lived long enough that cruelty doesn't shock him anymore, knowing that as long as people are desperate to escape their lives for the hope of something better in the U.S., there will be those perfectly willing to exploit them. Nightcrawler is less cynical, figuring this can't go ignored, and that Kim's owner had to have gotten her from somewhere. Whitney points out the church isn't the X-Men, but Kurt doesn't see the differences as being major. They wear uniforms, are supposed to tackle injustice, and dutifully follow their leader. In this case, Jesus Christ, who died for mankind's salvation, and he asks if they can do any less. Yeah, but the whole coming back from the dead thing is definitely different for you than it is for him. Right! And when you think about it, many comic characters are beloved and popular, but might get killed off by some mandate from corporate powers, and you were beloved and popular, but were killed off because of a mandate by... I'll just not finish that joke and carry on. Whitney points out that Jesus knew what he was doing, like all of it, why he was doing it, and what the return would be. But does Kurt have the same insight? How can he stop slavery when it's as old as civilization? How many people will he have to fight, and would his sacrifice have the same effect as the Lord's? Or would he end up wasting God's gift of his life? In a world of injustice, they do what they can, offering advice, shelter, and comfort. And Whitney leaves, suggesting his pupil pray. Well, here in 2025, when even the most devout have gotten sick of hearing thoughts and prayers for every tragedy, at least from cowardly do-nothing elected officials, Nightcrawler internally makes a very good point, and one that's scripturally accurate, that prayer isn't meant to substitute action. The Lord himself didn't just preach the good word, he was an activist and agitator, so Wagner feels obligated to use his God-given abilities to do more than the average holy man. My vote is to find the head trafficker, teleport him a few miles into the air, drop him, and loudly repeat, "The power of Christ compels you!" on the way down, before teleporting to a safe landing. If that doesn't work, there's always punching. Reactivating his inducer, he checks in on a much calmer but still scared Kim, who's been watched by a waiter from the Thai restaurant, and the only one there who actually speaks the language. Now isn't the best time to ask about the woman chasing her, and when Kurt mentions the police again, Kim becomes agitated, threatening to leave, so the two step outside. The waiter, sorry, they don't give his name, says she's scared of being deported after having been promised a seamstress job in the States, but ended up being a servant for low pay and long hours. Nobody wants to work anymore! A miracle for her, but U.S. citizens would consider it an insult. Unfortunately, because of the people who smuggle other people for a living are shockingly not trustworthy, she had to make a deal. Her family forked over all they had to get her into the country, and she has to work off the rest of their fee, working 24/7 for 2 years, never seeing 1 cent of her earnings. Not allowed to leave the house, nor speak to outsiders, and couldn't complain or question her masters under threat of being reported to INS. Really, it's Kim's own fault for not being born wealthy enough and in a safe, stable area to just not struggle for anything. The waiter pleads not to let her be sent back, given her ordeal and sacrifice, and adds that he recognizes the woman that may have been Kim's owner. We briefly stop in Texas, where Oleg has killed some rival crooks who were trying to run him out of town. Competition is healthy, so he says, and they rejected the idea of merging their operations, so the villain helps the market correct itself as he offs the final competitor. Kim's owner, Mrs. M. Soon, is at her home, trying to get a hold of someone regarding the girl's escape, when Kurt appears in his human guise, asking about who she was talking to, if they take returns, and if people come with warranties. Yeah, but customer service is such a hassle, since they are always threatening to have people come over and break your thumbs. She recognizes him from the restaurant, Kurt clarifying he's not a priest, and goes on to rationalize her actions, that she and her husband, both respected Thai-American business moguls, worked their way up from nothing to become successful. They were just trying to do a favor for an immigrant from their homeland, a job and a home in the U.S., only to get accusations of slavery from the skinny peasant.
She's a nice lady. Ew.
The elf demands a name of the one who sold the girl, but M soon tells him to get out before she calls the cops. Kurt turns away, shutting off his inducer and saying he'll visit again, perhaps not being as sweet, and leaves in a bamf. Em soon resumes her call, telling the person on the other end she knows where Kim is. Hey, she peeked ahead in the script too. Kurt managed to take a note with a number on it from Em Soon's office, certain it's the slavers, but is unsure how to proceed with it.
Place an order of my own? Prank call them? Guten Tag, is your Quicksilver running?
Approaching the church, he hears a scream and sees a van drive off with Kim inside. He teleports onto the hood, saying boo in a very delightful manner, making the goon stop, get out, and try shooting him, but to no avail, as he takes them out in short order.
Save yourself! Your firearms are useless against them!
Leading Kim back to the church, they find Father Whitney on the floor, attacked during the abduction, though we really don't see the injury. This is why he'd have preferred calling the cops, but Wagner reaffirms they'd send Kim away, and they have a responsibility to do all they can to help her. The world is harsh, and will remain so unless they do something to change it. Whitney is convinced and agrees to do something to help the young woman, while Kurt goes to inspect the slaver's van. Trying not to think about if his mentor had died, he soon finds a rental form for the vehicle, and the phone number they're on matches the one he got from Em Soon, meaning the address must be their hideout. Now he can prank them by sending 20 extra-large pizzas to their base. This lead takes him to a quaint, even pleasant neighborhood in Queens. People out with their kids or grandkids without fear. Then he finds the house he's looking for and stealthily pokes around, finding a man being beaten by several others. He can't discern much, other than the victim might be another slave, possibly having erred in some way in regards to the many boxes in the room, and his captor's use of sign language indicates he may be deaf. The injured man enters another room, with more people penned in like animals, all apparently deaf as well, given how they don't react to his presence nor hear each other's crying, and the issue ends on Kurt recalling Dante's Divine Comedy and a sign that read, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter." Today, most people know that as the tagline for Twitter. Issue 2's cover has a green, foggy background, against which Crawler stands sorrowfully, as arms reach out toward him. Probably isn't helping his mood that someone is grabbing his tail. This is why he hates working the convention circuit. Love the celebrities all you want, folks, just remember they're people who deserve personal space. I bet they're all asking about the third season of X-Men 97. Anyway, the issue begins in St. Michael's, Father Whitney having heard someone and calling them out, claiming to have called the police. It turns out to be our man Kurt, lighting a candle at the altar and blood on his hands, but assuring it's not his. Not that we can tell, since they neglected to actually color any of the red stuff on his hands anyway. Padre asks if he'd like to talk about it. Might make him feel better.
The Lord, though a good listener, is not always quick with his replies.
Doesn't help that some people have him labeled as spam. Helps even less that certain types don't follow him as much as they like to claim. Wagner explains the house he found, where Kim's would-be kidnappers were based, and the deaf people from Mexico crammed in a room like sardines. Their blank expressions reminded the mutant of some refugees from the future he encountered with the X-Men, whose world had succumbed to evil. They'd known no hope, no good, and their eyes matched those of the slaves in that house. He then shows the father a small keychain trinket, the kind sold by deaf people on the subway, with notes asking passengers to buy them for $1 to help them out. It's how they survive as part of the world so many ignore. The sellers would circle back to find either the unwanted merchandise or their payment from people who scarcely bother to make eye contact, as they offer notes of thanks or God bless you. That's in case someone sneezed and they didn't hear it because, deaf. The people in that house were forced to do this in order to pay off their debts for being brought into the country, and the deaf are more likely to stir some pity sales. The man we saw beaten apparently came up short, with none of the fellow captives moving to help him. The elf watched the head goon, Ted, worried about their boss's Oleg's wrath if they didn't move more product, demanding that their slaves be informed that they have to sell more of the trinkets, from barely 100 now to 120 a day. Otherwise, they'll be given over to immigration. And if they need further convincing, just threaten them with the same beating that other guy got earlier, which also will be visited upon their families in Mexico, or even their children. Oh, I really hope we get a special panel of a furry three-fingered fist caving this guy's face in. With the slaves in one room and out of the way, the 5 captors should be easily taken out. But since he might tip someone off with the distinctive odor that accompanies his teleporting, he sneaks in through the window of another room, The aforementioned and threatened children are being kept. They don't seem to speak or understand English, nor share their parents' hearing impairment. When a couple start crying, Kurt dusts off his circus skills, performing a few acrobatic poses and juggling, which quiets them down. He tries to get them to understand he's there to help, get them and their parents away from the bad men, and while acknowledging they shouldn't normally talk to strangers, he asks them to follow him out the door. I don't know if Sesame Street has an episode that covers the nuance of this specific situation. Don't go anywhere with strangers, kids, unless they can do an amusing trick. We get an interlude with Oleg in Chicago, finishing a pizza and talking with another associate requesting new girls for their prostitution ring. After a brief, let's call it, misunderstanding that comes off as a threat, Oleg did ask if he had to shut them down, so no surprise some guns were drawn. It's explained that girls from the last shipment have been in town for 5 months, which, while not an issue yet, lets them know the area, make friends, and eventually get uppity. Oleg likes how this manager takes action when he sees a problem. On the other hand, something we don't know, since that's when he's told about the issue in their New York operation and he has to leave. But his solution to the manager is essentially swapping the Chicago girls for some women from another city, so they're too shaken up to get comfortable. Is like how you say trading players in the sports ball. Back to St. Michael's. Kurt says he couldn't stand to witness how these people were being treated, nor able to grasp why they did nothing about their situation. Whitney reminds him they had little choice, with innocence in danger, and the only options available were to go to the police and get deported, or live on the streets. No friends, no money, unable to hear or speak the local lingo. Their vulnerability is why the slavers chose them. Kurt had prayed for guidance, but in the end, he did the only thing he could.
I announced that the slavers hated Bluey. The children showed no mercy. The fight was over before it began.
No, he started teleporting them outside. A few at first, and even though it caused him distress, he told the first batch to stay put with the promise of ice cream after. Well, he got the rest, hopefully in one more trip. But when he returned, one of the parents walked in, going on the offensive given the appearance of the X-Man and how a couple kids were missing. It's not much of a scuffle, since Kurt doesn't want to fight back, but it ends quickly when a couple slavers show up, one drawing his gun.
What the hell are you supposed to be? A leprechaun, but the color ran in the wash.
I have no joke here, that's just a great line. Putting his hands behind his head, our hero makes it clear he met with their associates earlier, and demands the captives be free. Then puts his hands down when reiterating his petition. It's like he was showing compliance to the armed goon for 5 whole seconds. Weird. Ted scoffs about where the deaf folk will go, then declares they're closing up shop, i.e. killing their slaves for now being too risky to keep around. This callous disregard toward other human beings broke something in Kurt, and he proceeded to deliver unto the thugs a mighty and righteous smackdown. He momentarily forgot about everything else, focused on the tactics necessary to eliminate the threats with his X-Men training. Adept in violence, though he abhors it. He warns the deaf man with the odd-faced baby to stay back, which lets Ted get a lucky punch, which doesn't do him much luck at all, as Crawler gets the drop on him, felling him in one punch. But he didn't stop there.
And again, and again, and again, and again.
Yeah, basically, he couldn't seem to stop slugging the guy as his hands got coated in his foe's blood, and seeming to hear Ted laughing at him that he wasn't helping anyone, didn't know what he was fighting for, and this had been a waste. Who cares about the opinion of a crass teddy bear that sounds like Peter Griffin? He regains his senses and stops, fearing that voice was right, as the enslaved walk in, one holding a gun. It was then Wagner realized that he didn't and couldn't understand what they were going through. He was a superhero that took out 5 losers in a one-sided fight, and the slaves would have to deal with the aftermath. He tried telling them they were free and should go, even losing his temper and throwing one of the boxes of trinkets. He overturned their lives, even if they weren't great, with nothing to offer in return, and no reason to trust him. Yet they did anyway, as the beaten man pointed to his collar, then to his own forehead, which, according to a little sign language research I did, means that he believes, indicating he's also Christian. And perhaps if the church in real life had done a better job cleaning its own house, more people could more easily trust those with that collar in real life. Our hero called the cops using Ted's phone, and the slaves leave their suburban prison. Kurt wanted to stop them, give some kind of alternative, even if it meant staying in the house, but let them go. They were trusting the X-Man, even as he wondered if he'd done God's work, while the freed families made their way to the nearest police station. After dropping Ted off at said precinct, Kurt returned to the house to poke around for clues, but by then the place had been cleared out, leaving no trace that anything had happened. Really? How long was he gone? The guy teleports, for crying out loud. Even if the other 4 creeps woke up, they had dozens of boxes of those tchotchkes to move. Did Kurt actually stop to buy those kids ice cream? He begins to wonder if he really did any good. Maybe 1 or 3 of those goons see prison time, but the larger problem just retreats back into the shadows. Father Whitney assures him that he helped those people, giving them enough renewed strength to leave their captivity. The cost of doing God's work is never really knowing how their actions, no matter how well-intentioned, will pan out. And for now, he'll just need to have faith that the path forward will present itself. Turns out Kurt had held on to Ted's cell phone because it rings and he answers. It's Oleg, upset about losing merchandise, meaning Kim, and the men sent to collect her. The elf doesn't hide that he's the reason for the smuggler's problem, and he isn't scared of him. Which the Russian replies that he's not scared either. Just a businessman running an American-style enterprise. Wagner doesn't care about his rationalization of selling people and promises to shut his operation down, one way or another. When asked how he plans to do that, Kurt throws the phone, breaking it, and the issue ends with Oleg in quiet contemplation with his cigarette.
If he break Ted's phone, that put me in red. Can no longer afford criminal empire. Wow, this German guy's good.
While we got some nice acrobatic action, Crawler's not convinced his mission is accomplishing much. Tune in next week for the rest of the story, and if his doubts are confirmed. I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.